Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we are cracking open a really pivotal chapter in American history, the Gilded Age. Now, this was a time of just dazzling contradictions. You had genius inventors literally reshaping the world seemingly overnight, but the massive fortunes they created, well, they cast some very long, very dark shadows.
Okay, let's start with this word right here. Gilded. This is the key to the whole thing. The name actually comes from Mark Twain, and he used it to describe an age that, on the surface, looked totally golden and prosperous. But if you scratch that surface, well, underneath that glittering layer was something a whole lot rougher and way more complex.
So, first, let's talk about that shiny golden surface. In the late 1800s, America wasn't just, innovating a little bit. It was absolutely on fire with new ideas. Ideas that didn't just change things, they completely rewired daily life and turned the U.S. into a global industrial giant.
I mean, the pace of progress was just staggering. Take a look at this timeline. We're talking about the span of a single human life. You could have been born in a world where the big new thing was the sewing machine, and by the time you were older, you had the telephone, the electric light bulb, and then boom, the car and even the airplane. The very rules of time and distance were being totally rewritten.
And this era was really defined by these larger-than-life inventors, right? Guys who became household names. We're talking about Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, Henry Ford. And listen, these weren't just guys tinkering around in a dusty workshop. No way. They were visionaries. They didn't just see how to invent the future, they knew how to build it, and on a massive industrial scale.
Now, this whole explosion of invention, it really couldn't have happened without two crucial ingredients. Think of it like a recipe. First, you need steel. Lots of it. The Bessemer process made steel super cheap and incredibly strong. That's what you need to build all the railroads and skyscrapers. And the second ingredient? Oil. The discovery of crude oil was the fuel that literally powered all these new machines.
So you gotta ask, right? With all this insane progress, creating just an unbelievable amount of new wealth, who was actually getting rich? Where did all that money go? And that question takes us from the brilliant inventors to the, let's call them titans, who built massive empires on top of all these new technologies.
See, as these businesses got bigger and way more complicated and risky, a whole new way of organizing them popped up. And it was a structure that was perfect for concentrating a ton of power and wealth into just a few hands. And that structure was the modern corporation. Seriously, this was a total game changer. The idea is you sell off little pieces of the company, stock, to raise huge amounts of cash. This lets you fund these massive projects. But here's the clever part. It also limits the risk for any one person. If things go south, you only lose what you put in. It was, honestly, the perfect vehicle for building an empire.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. You've got the two heavyweight strategies of the age, and boy, were they ruthless. You've got John D. Rockefeller and his horizontal integration. His plan was simple: buy or crush everybody else in the oil business, total domination. Then you have Andrew Carnegie with vertical integration. His idea was different. He wanted to own every single step of making steel, from the mines that dug up the iron ore to the mills that churned out the final product. That gave him complete control over his costs and quality.
Rockefeller's endgame? A monopoly. Plain and simple. He pulled it off with something called the Standard Oil Trust, which was basically one giant company that controlled dozens of smaller ones. This gave him almost complete control of the entire American oil industry. Think about that power. He could set whatever price he wanted for consumers, and he could even strong-arm the railroads into giving him secret, cheaper shipping rates than anyone else.
But here's where it gets complicated. These same ruthless titans had a really complex view of all that money. Andrew Carnegie, especially, he wrote this thing called the Gospel of Wealth. And in it, he basically argued that it was a rich person's moral duty to give their fortune away for the public good. He even said the man who dies rich dies disgraced. Wild, right? And that creates this incredible paradox, doesn't it? These guys were seen in two totally opposite ways. So what were they? Were they robber barons, these cutthroat capitalists who got rich by exploiting their workers? Or were they amazing philanthropists who gave us things like Carnegie Hall and countless libraries and universities that we still use today? The truth is, they were both. And that contradiction, that's the absolute heart of the Gilded Age.
Okay, so now it's time to peel back that shiny gold layer. Let's take a look at what life was really like underneath it all, down in the factories, the steel mills, and the mines that were the engine of this whole revolution.
For the millions of men, women, and, yes, children who actually made all this progress happen, life was just brutal. We're talking painfully long hours for wages that could barely keep you alive. The conditions were incredibly dangerous and unhealthy. And as the machines got smarter, the people running them were treated as, well, as disposable parts, easily replaced.
So, faced with conditions like that, what do? Well, it was only a matter of time before workers figured out they couldn't fight these huge corporations alone. They realized the only way to get a fair shake, to get a piece of the pie they were helping to bake, was to band together.
And out of this, two major unions came on the scene. First, you had the Knights of Labor. They were real pioneers, a huge union that was honestly radical for its day because they let in women, black people, and unskilled workers, pretty much everyone. Then came the American Federation of Labor, the AFL. Their strategy was a bit different. They focused on organizing workers who had specific skills into this powerful coalition.
And their main weapon, their core strategy, was something called collective bargaining. The idea is actually pretty simple, but it's revolutionary. Think about it. One worker going to the boss to ask for a raise. They have zero power. But what if hundreds or even thousands of workers all go together, speaking with one voice? Now that's power. That's how you get the leverage to actually negotiate for better pay and safer workplaces.
But make no mistake, this fight was not peaceful. It often got incredibly bloody. I mean, the struggle between workers and the companies basically exploded into open warfare in the streets. You had these huge, violent clashes. The Haymarket Affair in Chicago, the Homestead strike at one of Carnegie's own steel mills, the Pullman strike. And in these fights, workers weren't just up against the company, they were facing private security forces, the state militia, and sometimes even the U.S. Army itself.
Finally, with all this corporate power just running wild, the government decided it had to do something. So they passed the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890, which was supposed to make monopolies illegal. The problem was, the law was written kind of vaguely, and for years, the courts tended to side with the big corporations anyway. So at first, this big new law didn't really have a lot of teeth.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, the Gilded Age did more than just build railroads and skyscrapers. It basically forged the modern America that you and I live in today. It really set the stage for all these conflicts that would define the next century. And you know what's wild? The core tensions of that era, that push and pull between innovation and inequality, between the power of corporations and the rights of workers, that huge gap between incredible wealth and grinding poverty, those are the exact same debates we are still having right now. Which really leaves us with one big important question to think about.